Part 3. Manga pointed his finger, preparing to cast a spell on the straw man in the corner of the arena. Manga did not know many pure damage spells. Instead, he focused on instant death spells with additional effects. As a result, he was less effective against non-living entities. He should have selected the simple damaging spell against a target like the one before him, but Manga's levels were largely in necromancy-type classes, which strengthened his necromantic spells. However, the effectiveness of these spells was several notches below a character whose class levels enhanced combat spells. He glanced curiously at the children to the side, whose eyes were glittering in anticipation. He felt uneasy as he wondered whether he could live up to their expectations. Then, Manga peeked at the two huge monsters. Their massive bodies were 3 meters tall, and resembled inverted triangles. Their skeletal structure was a mix of humans and dragons and covered in corded, sinewy muscles, which were in turn sheathed by a layer of scales that were harder than steel. Their faces resembled those of dragons, while their tails were as thick as tree trunks. They were wingless and bipedal, like a dragon standing on its hind legs. Their arms were wider around than a man's torso, and each was about half the length of its body. They bore weapons that resembled both a shield and a sword. These monsters were called Dragonkin, and under the control of Aura's beast tamer skills, they rearranged the Colosseum to her liking. Although they were level 55 monsters with no special abilities of note, their powerful arms and prodigious stamina were a match for higher-leveled monsters. Manga sighed softly, and then looked back at the strawman. It was quite troubling to have people look at him with expectation in their eyes. His objective this time was to verify that he could use magic. The reason for allowing Aura and Mare to witness this experiment was to impress his power upon them before the other guardians arrived. In this way, they would learn that opposing Manga was a foolish course of action. The two kids did not seem like they would betray him, nor did he feel that they would betray him. However, if he lost the ability to use his magic, Manga was not confident that they would stay loyal to him. Aura treated Manga like an old friend, but to Manga, it was the first time they had met. He could tell that the twins were the lovingly crafted embodiment of his guild members' hard work. However, there was no guarantee that their design and programming was perfect. In the face of countless situations and stimuli, a discrepancy or weakness might appear somewhere. They were intelligent beings who could think on their own, so flaws in their reasoning must exist somewhere. If they were not programmed to be loyal to weaklings, what would that mean for him? In all likelihood, they were not written to be slavishly loyal. That would mean that whether or not they obeyed the order would depend on who the giver was. And it would be bad enough if they did not listen to him, but what if they betrayed their guild leader after finding out that he was powerless? It was not good to have too many doubts, but blind trust was not a wise move either. He would cross that bridge when he came to it. Manga turned his mind to the present. Another reason for coming here was that if he found that he could not use magic, he could discuss the situation with Aura and Mare. The twins thought he had come to test the power of the staff, so now that its power had been proven, he could cover up any ineffectiveness of his own magic. It was a pretty good plan. Manga could not help but congratulate himself. Had he ever been so cool and calculating in the past? However, there was nobody here who could answer Manga's question. He cast aside the doubts in his mind, and focused on using the magic of Yggdrasil. There were over 6,000 spells in the game, from Tier 1 to Tier 10, as well as Super Tier magic. These spells were divided among various types and schools, and Manga could use 718 of them. A normal level 100 player would only be able to use 300 of them, so Manga was an exceptional case. Manga had memorized almost all of these spells, and he considered which one to use now. To begin with, because the restriction on friendly fire had been lifted, he needed to know how the effective radius of a spell would show itself. Therefore, he decided against a single target spell, but picked an area effect spell. Next, considering his target was a straw man, he should. In Yggdrasil, he could cast a spell by tapping its respective icon. However, there were no icons for him to touch. Therefore, there had to be some other way. He was not sure, but he had a faint idea of how to use his magic. It was a power hidden within him. Just like how he had deactivated his negative touch manga focused within himself. An icon appeared, as though floating in mid-air. And Ain smiled in delight. He was fully aware of information like the spell's effective radius, its recast delay, and so on. Knowing this information, being sure of his power filled him with a surging excitement and warm satisfaction. Unlike in Yggdrasil, he felt that the magic was part of him. This was a satisfaction he could never have experienced in Yggdrasil. He channeled the jubilation in his heart. Although his mood calmed quickly, he could still feel joy and excitement into his fingertip, and spoke the words. Fireball. An expanding globe of flame shot out from the finger pointing at the straw man. The fireball struck the straw man unerringly, as he had predicted. It burst, releasing a wave of scorching flame that blew the straw man away. The inner part of the fireball exploded, turning the straw man and the surrounding area into a sea of fire. All this happened in an instant. Then, besides the blackened straw man, there was nothing left. Fu, Aura and Mare watched manga snicker, clueless as to what was going on. Aura set up another straw man. Ah, yes, at once. Hurry up and do it. One of the dragonkin picked up another straw man, and placed it beside the burned one. Manga paced around the straw man, before casting a spell on it. Napalm. A column of flame appeared beside the straw man, engulfing it in fire. Manga paused a beat, then cast another spell on the remnants of the straw man. Fireball. The fireball struck the remains of the straw man, scattering its ashes in a puff of smoke. The recast time between spells was the same as in Yggdrasil. The actual process of casting was faster than in Yggdrasil. Previously, in order to cast an area effect spell, he would need to choose the spell, then move the area effect cursor over the desired area. The process now was quicker than that. Perfect, Manga said, his voice filled with the same satisfaction he felt in his heart. Manga-sama, should I prepare more strawmen? Aura still did not understand. She was already aware that Manga was a mighty magic caster, so she did not feel the show before her was anything special. However, that was the impression Manga wanted to give them, and from the look on the twins' faces, it would seem he had succeeded. No, there is no need. I wish to try something else. After rejecting Aura's suggestion, Manga began his next experiment. Message. The first party he tried to contact was a GM. In Yggdrasil, when one used the message spell, as long as the other party was within the game, one would hear a call tone. Otherwise, there would be no sound, and the spell would immediately terminate. What happened now was somewhere between both of those. It felt like something was constantly reaching out, as though looking for something to connect to. This was the first time Manga had experienced something like this, and it was difficult to describe. This feeling continued for a while, and in the end, after failing to connect, the message spell ended. A profound sense of disappointment flooded through him. Manga tried casting the same spell again. This time, he did not choose a GM. This time, he picked one of his comrades from the past, a member of Ainzu Gown. He cast the spell, though his heart was filled with 1 part of hope and 99 parts of resignation. As expected, there was no response. He tried to contact the 41 members of the guild with the message, but after receiving no reply, Manga gently shook his head. In truth, he had expected this outcome and had resigned himself to it, but actually being confronted by that fact filled him with an incomparable feeling of despair. In the end, Manga decided to contact Sebas. It got through. This proved that the message spell was working, and that most likely, it could only contact people within this new world. Manga-sama. A voice of deepest respect echoed throughout his mind. Manga considered that Sebes might have been bowing to him on the other side of the message, like in real-life companies. Just then, Sebes spoke again, as Manga fell silent from thinking about these ridiculous things. "May I ask if something is wrong?" Forgive me. I spaced out there. That's right. How are the surroundings like?" "Yes. We're surrounded by plains, with no intelligent creatures in sight." "A plain, not a swamp. The great underground tomb of Nazarick should have been bordered by a swamp that was inhabited by frog-like demi-humans called Tuvegs. The swamp was shrouded in mist, and it was poisonous." "Yes. There are only plains around us." Manga could not help but smile. All this was too much. In other words, the great underground tomb of Nazarick has been wholly transported to a different place. "Sebes, is there anything floating in the sky, or did anything like a message appear?" "No, there is nothing like that. The heavens are as boundless as the 6th floor's night sky." "What? Did you say night sky? Is there anything suspicious around you?" "No. I have not seen anything unusual. Besides the great underground tomb of Nazarick, there are no other man-made structures in sight." Is that so? Is that so? What should he say? All Manga could do was grab his head and try to think. But in his heart, he knew that this was most likely the case. Sebes's silence was a subtle hint that he was awaiting orders. Manga glanced at the strap on his left wrist. In another 20 minutes, the other guardians would arrive. If that was the case, there was only one order he could give. "Return in 20 minutes. When you come back to Nazarick, head to the Colosseum. All the guardians will be coming, so when you arrive, I hope you will tell them about what you saw." "Understood. Then, gather as much information as you can before you return." After hearing Sebes's acknowledgement, Manga terminated the message spell. Just as Manga was about to sigh in relief that everything was over, he remembered the expectant looks on the twins' faces. He had already told them he was going to verify the staff's power, so he had to let them see it. Manga grasped the staff, and pondered which fraction of its might he should reveal. The numberless powers within the staff of Ainzuel seemed to be begging Manga to unleash them. Right now, he needed a flashy spell. Summon Primal Fire Elemental. In accordance with Manga's will, the orb of fire grasped within one of the staff's snake mouths pulsed with puissance. Manga could feel the movement of a mighty, invisible power, and thrust the staff of Ainzuel forth. A vast ball of light bloomed from the tip of the staff, and a vortex of roaring flame spilled forth from that globe of radiance. The fires spun faster and faster, until the tornado of flame reached a width of 4 meters and a height of 6 meters. The Crimson Inferno threw off gusts of scorching air in all directions. From the corner of his eye, he could see the dragonkin protecting Aura and Mare with their vast bodies. The searing winds made his cape flap violently. So intense was the heat that it would not have been unusual for a normal person to be burned by them. But Manga had acquired a complete immunity to fire damage in order to negate one of the weaknesses of the undead, so it had no effect on him at all. Soon, the vast cyclone of fire, swallowing the surrounding air as it burned hot enough to melt metal, began to flicker and shudder as it took a humanoid form. Primal fire elementals could be said to be among the highest ranking among all elemental monsters. They were over level 85. Just like he had with the Moonlight Wolves, Manga felt a mysterious connection to the primal fire elemental. Yua. Aura was watching it intently as she made noises of surprise. As she looked upon the top-tier elemental, something that even her summoning powers would not be able to bring forth, Aura's face bore a look of excited admiration, like a child who had just received a dearly beloved present. "Do you want to fight it?" After a moment of hesitation, Aura grinned innocently. Compared to a normal child's smile, hers was a little no. The truth was that it was quite scary. In contrast, Mare's smile from the side seemed more like that of a child. "Can I? Don't worry. It'll be fine even if you defeat it." Manga shrugged to indicate that it was all right. The staff could summon one primal fire elemental a day. In other words, the staff could summon another such being after one day had passed. As such, defeating it would not be a great loss. I suddenly remembered that I had something urgent to do. Mare. A hand reached out and firmly grasped Mare's arm, not allowing him to escape. His sister had no intention of fleeing. Aura's smile stopped Mare in his tracks. Perhaps to manga it might have been a cute girl smile. But to the other person present, who looked almost the same as Aura, it was anything but cute, and Mare's face froze solid as he looked on it. She dragged Mare in front of the primal fire elemental. Mare's eyes looked around, and he looked desperately to manga for help. In response to his hopeful smile that blossomed delicately on his face, manga simply clapped. The flower of hope promptly wilted. "All right, try your best, you two. Don't blame me if you get hurt." Aura responded energetically, in contrast with Mare's nearly inaudible and despondent reply. Manga felt that as long as Mare was around, neither of them would get hurt. Thus, by the power of the connection between himself and his summoned creature, he ordered the primal fire elemental to attack the twins. As the conflagration that was the primal fire elemental approached them, the twins met its attack with Aura as the frontliner while Mare was the rearguard. Aura slashed at the primal fire elemental, holding her whip in both her hands, while Mare used magic to deal damage. "Well, it seems it'll be an easy fight." Manga's eyes left the one-sided battle taking place before him and began to ponder the other things he need to investigate. He had already finished verifying that he could use and activate his spells and equip magic items. Thus, the next things he had to check on were his other items. Scrolls, wands, and rods were particularly important. All of them were magic items that could produce a spell-like effect. Scrolls were one-use expendables, while rods and wands had charges, which they consumed to produce their effects. Manga possessed many magic items. He was a hoarder by nature and did not like using expendable items because he felt it was a waste. To the point where he did not even feel like using high-end recovery items when he encountered a boss. This went beyond mere prudence to miserliness, which was why his stock of items was so great. In Yggdrasil, all of these were stored in his personal inventory. Then, in this world, where had his inventory and all its contents gone? Manga recalled how he had opened his inventory in the past, and reached his hand into the air as though searching for something. It felt as though he was reaching his hand past the surface of a lake, and an observer would think that Manga's hand and part of his arm had vanished into nothingness. Then, like he was opening a window, Manga swept his hand to one side. A hole appeared out of nowhere, and within it were many beautifully crafted magic staves. It was exactly like the inventory in Yggdrasil. He moved his hand in a scrolling motion. In the space revealed, one could see all manner of scrolls, wands, weapons, armor, cosmetic items, gems, potions, other consumables. The sheer number of magic items in there was awe-inspiring. Thus relieved, Manga could not help but laugh. If this were the case, Manga felt that he could guarantee his own safety even if everyone in the tomb set themselves against him. As he absently watched Aura and Mare's intense battle, Manga considered the things he had learned so far. Were the NPCs he met programs? No, their sapience was such that they were indistinguishable from human beings. Programs could not show such complex emotions. He could assume that for some mysterious reason, they had ended up like human beings. And what was this world? He had no idea. Since he could use Yggdrasil's magic here, it made sense to think of this place as being in Yggdrasil, but after observing various discrepancies, it did not seem like he was in a game. Was he in a game, or a new world? The answer was probably one of those. How should I deal with future events? Manga had already verified that he could use his abilities from Yggdrasil. That being the case, if the data for the monsters and NPCs of the Great Underground Tomb of Nazarick had carried over as well, he could be reasonably sure that they were not his enemies. The thing was, if they were not data programs, but some other kind of being, then he would have to treat them differently. For the time being, it would be best to display the attitude of a superior being and put on an act of stern majesty provided he could pull it off. In what direction should I proceed in the future? He should search hard for clues. Although he was not sure what was going on with this world, for the time being, Manga was simply a clueless wayfarer. He had to take small steps and carefully gather information. If this is another world, should I try to return to the real world? There were doubts in his heart. If he had friends in the real world, then he should go back to it. If his parents were still alive, he would desperately find a way back to them. If he had family members to care for, or a girlfriend. But he did not have anyone like that. His life was an endless cycle of going to the office to work, and returning home to log on to Yggdrasil, where he would prepare for his comrades to come back. But now, none of that waited for him. Then, was there any point at all in going back? But if he could go back, then he should think of a way to get back. It was better to have more options, because the world outside might be a hellish one. What should I do? Manga's quiet mumbling carried softly through the air. Part